There is a kind of silence that exists only in the deep and forgotten parts of the world. Not the peaceful kind, not the kind that soothes you to sleep, no. This silence is too quiet. The kind where air feels thick, like it's waiting. The kind where shadows seem to breathe. This story was shared as a real personal experience, so once you hear it, you may never trust what's outside your window ever again. This is The Thing in the Window. But before we delve on into this window, if you like scary stories, you're at the right place. Hello and welcome. We are so happy to have you. Make sure you subscribe because it would just be great to continue this journey with you. It would help me out a bunch if you give this video a big old like and you turn on that notification bell so you can be the first to know about all these stories that we have coming up for you. When her husband was deployed overseas, a young mother, let's call her M, left the city life behind in search of some quiet. And quiet she found in a lonely rental home buried deep in the forested corners of Washington state. The house sat at the end of a long gravel road that curled like a serpent through dense pine trees. It was so remote, the canopy practically swallowed the sky. There were no street lamps, no neighbors for a mile, and most importantly, none of that big city mess of sound. No, this was just M, her 2-year-old son, and the sweet chirping of crickets echoing through the trees. The house itself was worn, but charming, you know. It had white paint peeling at the edges, a front porch swing that creaked and whistled with every breeze, moss that clung onto the roof like a second skin. It looked like something out of an old storybook, like a place where you might stumble upon fairies, or something else entirely. She spent that first day settling into her cozy new life, unpacking all the boxes as her son toddled around with his favorite stuffed bear. They ate dinner on the floor, the baby's favorite, of course, some mac and cheese with a side of sliced apples, and when bedtime finally rolled around, she tucked him in as the world outside had already melted into a velvety silence. Not a single car passed, not a single dog barked. The house was wrapped in stillness. That night, she sat on the porch, sipping her tea and breathing in that damp, earthy scent of the forest. It felt peaceful at last. But sometimes peace is just a disguise for a calm before something ancient stirs. Around 2:15 a.m., she woke up with a startle. Not from a sound exactly, but from the absence of sound. The kind of waking where, you know, your pulse is already racing, though you don't know why. Then she heard it. Crunch, crunch. Footsteps. Slow, methodical. The unmistakable sound of gravel shifting under weight. And it was coming from right outside her window. She froze, breath caught in her throat, ears straining to grasp another sound. Maybe it was a deer or a stray dog, but it didn't sound like an animal. It sounded purposeful, like someone walking in slow circles. She tiptoed out of bed toward the window, and with every step, each floorboard creaked, piercing through the silence like a scream. She arrived at the window. She pulled the curtain back just an inch, and nothing. Just some trees swaying in the moonlight and the faint gleam of her own reflection staring right back at her. But she could feel it. Something was watching. The next morning, she searched the yard. No footprints, no bent branches, no explanation. But that night, she slept with the lights on. Only 2 nights later, something even stranger happened. M was over in the kitchen washing the dishes as the sun dipped behind the trees and draped the entire house in that eerie, orangey twilight color. Her son was in the living room quietly playing with his little toy cars, and he had a pretty light disposition about him. Until suddenly he stopped. Completely. His gaze was fixated on the outside world through the window, and his little shoulders stiffened and one tiny finger rose, pointing. "Mommy? Who's that man?" Her stomach sank. "What man?" she asked, attempting to invoke some sort of pseudo-calmness. "That man in the window. He's smiling at me." She ran over to her baby and clutched him as she looked outside and saw nothing. "There's no man," she tried to reassure him. "Yes, he's still there," her son said, "and he's still smiling at me." She rushed to lock every single door and window in that house. She pulled every curtain so tight that not even moonlight could slip through. And as a last line of defense, she pushed up her couch up against the front door and wedged it right there. Nothing was getting in. And even with all that, she could still feel him outside, watching. The days all began to blur together. The only difference was that each one grew more tense than the last. She decided that the remedy was a hot shower. She was going to keep it short, only 10 minutes, and keep her door open in case, she heard anything, she could be ready. She went in, tempted to scrub off all the fear. She got out to a fogged up mirror and she removed the fog. In the reflection, she saw that the front door was cracked open. Not shut like she had left it, not locked like she had left it, but it wasn't wide open, just enough so that someone could slip in, or something could slip in. She rushed to the door to slam it shut, bolting every lock through shaking fingers. There had been no wind, no draft, no reason for this to have happened. The next morning, desperate for some answers, Em finally decided it was time to pay a neighbor a visit. The closest one was over a mile away, and he was actually the perfect person to reach out to, given that he had resided in these woods for several decades. After exchanging some pleasantries, she finally worked up the nerve to ask, "So, have you ever seen anything strange?" He stared at her and his face grew grim. He knew this was the true reason for her visit. He asked, "Has your boy seen him yet?" "Seen who?" she asked back. He hesitated, as if struggling internally to get these next words out. "The man who smiles. The children always see him first." And that's all he would say. No matter how much Em kept pressing him, he wouldn't offer anything else up. Finally, she decided it was time to go, and as she turned around, he stopped her and offered one bit of advice. He said, "Don't look too long. He'll notice then." That was the last straw. She didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. She laid in bed, grasping her son tightly, his little hand clutching hers so tight. The entire house was unnervingly still, and the silence was unnatural until 3:17 a.m. when the silence broke. She heard fragments of fractured syllables, almost like a recording played in reverse. The sound drifted through the walls like smoke, and all led to one spot, right outside her bedroom window. She stood there in front of the curtained window and she looked down and tried to gather up as much bravery as she could muster. And when she felt like she was as fueled up on courage as she could be, she sharply yanked back that curtain, and there she saw it. It was a figure, tall and emaciated. Its skin was pale. Its mouth was grotesquely wide, curved into this smile that looked so disturbing, and its eyes, or at least these two sockets that were hollow where its eyes should be, glared directly at her. Without a thought, she grabbed her son, her phone, her keys, and she was out the door. She didn't even grab her shoes. Barefooted, she decided she was not looking back. Em and her son were able to relocate successfully, thankfully. However, she did have to return to collect all her things. She made sure to bring along a friend and that it was daylight, of course. As they were packing things away, there was this sense of violation, as if something had moved in after she moved out. And considering the knowing glances that her and her friend kept exchanging, it seemed that Em wasn't alone in this thought. Years passed and they never spoke of this. Happily ever after, you could say. Then one afternoon, her son brought home this project. Included in this project was a drawing, and then Em took a second look at this drawing. It was of a long, tall, emaciated man, pale-skinned, hollow holes where his eyes should be, and a familiar, unnerving smile. She stared at it and then finally asked her son, "Who is this?" Her son looked at her with the most sincere face and said, "This is the man from the window. I still see him sometimes." So, if your child ever points to a dark corner of a room or tells you that someone is smiling at them, believe them. Because some things don't knock. They just smile.